Welcome back to the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about what really matters when collecting masterpiece transformers. I'm sure people are going to argue, they're going to say that it's articulation, it's paint, it's aesthetics, it's the transformation, it's the scale, it's having the latest and greatest figure, it's the value of your item. But you know what? I'm going to tell you what is the most important, and at the end of this video, 100% of you will agree with me. I guarantee it. But let's get into talking about this. Coming up! Okay, so the first thing I want to say when it comes to what matters in masterpiece collecting is the look. It's the overall aesthetic of the figure, of the character, of your collection, and the compilation of those figures and those characters in your collection. There's always that debate, is it two-tone, is it hyper-tune, do you want a little bit of real world in it? And so that's a little bit different for every person, but at the end of the day, the look, the aesthetic, how it looks is really, really important. I mean, there's a whole lot of things to this, but does it matter the most? Does the aesthetic, does the look, does the appeal of how it looks on the shelf, is that what matters the most? Some people say they can be happy with the 1.0 version of the Fans Toys Sea Spray. Some people say, nope, they got to have the 2.0 version, and we're going to kind of get into that. But with it, the aesthetics do make a big difference, and the way a figure looks is very important to a masterpiece collector because you're chasing perfection. Is chasing perfection what really matters the most? Next up, we have the articulation. Does articulation matter the most? You know, a lot of people will go into discussing it needs to have the butterfly in the shoulders. And a lot of people go into Fans Toys is less articulated than they should be. There's less articulation than people would like to see with their Fans Toys figures, especially this day and age. And is that something that matters the most? Having the articulation mattering the most. Now, there's a lot of reasons why articulation is extremely important. Wanting to put your figures in the poses that you want to see them in is very important. So articulation is very important because if you can't get them to pose the way you want them to pose, or you can't get them to display the way you want them to display, you can't play with them the way you want them to play, then it becomes a problem. Certain iconic scenes in a show or a movie that you want to reenact, or you want to display them in the middle of that scene, can't be done unless they have proper adequate articulation, and I think that's why a lot of people complain when it's not there. When we don't see that level of articulation, people get upset about that, disappointed, and rightfully so. If your Ultra Magnus can't say open, darn it, open, and do it the right way. By the way, Ultra Magnus is a lot of fun at parties. Anyhow, there are certain scenes that people want to reenact, and I truly understand why. Articulation is a big part of how we achieve that. Next, paint. Does paint matter? I mean, a lot of people say that they want to collect Masterpiece line because it's a premium line, and paint does give you that air and feeling of premium. So does diecast. So does diecast matter? Is having diecast, or could you have just a really lightweight, flimsy feeling? Well, it could be well built in plastic and lightweight all at the same time. But if it's lightweight and it's not painted, does that matter? Does it have to be painted really well? Have a nice sheen to it? Does it have to have that heft and feel of quality? It feels like quality when there's diecast in it, even though that doesn't really mean it's quality. But does paint and diecast really matter? Does it matter the most? Does transformation matter the most? A lot of people will talk about how the transformation is terrible and they don't ever want to do the transformation again, or sometimes the transformation can actually be fun and they don't mind flipping a triple changer around several times. I hear that the MMC Saltus is one of the better springers for flipping back and forth, and with that, a lot of people like that one. Now also, if the transformation's bad and you don't want to flip it back and forth, that's something that matters to some people, but in my opinion, not 70%. But what about accessories? Being able to reenact certain scenes where you're loading a missile into a missile launcher or something along those lines. Do accessories matter the most? Is that what matters the most in Masterpiece Collector? Is it accessories that collectors like the most? Does scale matter the most? Is it having that perfect scale? Growing up in the G1 era where things didn't match. They didn't match scale-wise to what we saw on the show. They didn't match aesthetically either to what we saw on the show. But being able to finally get that figure, get that group of figures, group of characters, and match correct heights, does that matter? Does that matter the most? Does size matter? Well, that kind of goes back to Ultra Magnus being fun at parties, but does size really matter? And a lot of people say yes, size does matter. Bigger is better. Bigger for the masterpiece collector is better. And that's what people want in their collection, is a sizable size to their combiners. So does size really matter? Or are you okay with not having the biggest and going with something a little smaller? Because, say, maybe they just like the aesthetic and look and the transformation more. Maybe that was more important. That mattered more important than them being huge and massive. Maybe that's what matters. In some cases, size is acceptable and reasonable, and you can get a big figure that's big and scales properly, but it's not too big or too overly done. But other cases, like a Unicron and the City Bots, to a point, they're just too big. That's just too darn big. But does size really matter? Does getting to fulfill a childhood dream of getting your Melloway figures in the form of Masterpiece, something that is just something you never would have thought would be something that you'd get, is that what really matters? Does it matter actually achieving something that you never thought you could achieve? Acquiring something that you never thought would even get made? It's surprising that it even gets made. Is that what matters most? Getting those things that we had as a kid that we thought were special back then, that are now special today? Does having the newest, latest, and greatest figure, is that what matters the most? Does it matter the most that you have the most current or the best? Maybe the best was an older figure. A lot of times the newest one coming out should be the best figure, but it's not. But having the best, having the latest and greatest, whichever one, is that what really matters the most? Or does it matter most to have one of every released for a particular character? Like a lot of Optimus Prime collectors out there. Does collecting for value matter? Knowing that you've got all these figures and you've spent $20,000 on some Transformers that you know you could get your $20,000 back out of them. Does the value matter? You collecting for value? Does it matter the most? Is it if this stuff drops to where your collection's only worth $15,000, you're having a bad time about it? If it somehow you have figures that are worth $600, are you selling those figures? Does the value matter the most? I gotta tell you that it actually doesn't to most collectors. Does finishing a team, does that matter? Does that matter the most? Is that the most important thing to you? Collecting and knowing that you could finish your team. Collecting and knowing that I've got this team that's finally completed this combiner set, and I'm so happy that I've got it. It's my favorite from back in the day when I was a kid, and I gotta have a modern iteration. Or does that not matter that much? You can the last one, it doesn't matter when it comes. Yeah, the fifth one, it doesn't matter when it comes. Or does it really matter a lot? As in, you don't want to buy any more fan toys till they show up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you what really does matter when it comes to collecting, and that is the feeling and how it makes you feel. When you collect Masterpiece Transformers, you've got all this time, money, effort, and research and resources put towards a hobby and collecting it. And if it doesn't make you feel good, positive, happy, remember maybe a simpler time or a more simple time. If this doesn't bring you joy, the feeling of joy, then it doesn't matter. Because what matters the most is the feeling that you get when you collect these things. It should be a positive, happy, uplifting feeling. It shouldn't be a negative feeling. You should feel good about your hobby and your collecting. And that goes for anything that you do that you're passionate about. You should feel good about what you are passionate about. Does it feel good to pose your figures in a way that you could never pose the G1 figures? Or even earlier iterations of Transformers? Does it feel good to get characters that we never got back in the G1 era and finally getting them realized in modern day? Whether it be Masterpiece, Legends, or Mainline. Does it feel good to get a toy color deco of a character that you've always wanted, but see, you spent more time with the toy than with the show, so you associate more with the toy colors than the show colors, so the toy aesthetic means more to you? Does it feel good to get a masterpiece representation of a figure that was completely horrible back in the G1 era, and to finally see it, well, that character properly treated to a point? Does that feel good? Does it feel good to land a figure you've been looking for a long time? Does it feel good? How does that feel? How does it feel to finally get these figures that you've been seeing sell for $500 a piece, but get the whole set for $500, $400, maybe cheaper with a reissue? Does it feel good to see all of your figures scaling together very well? Scaling and looking right, matching the show and the aesthetic and everything that you remember from back in the day that you could not do back in the day? Or is it finally realizing all of those characters that you want in masterpiece scale, modern iterations, modern paint, modern aesthetic, modern engineering, being able to actually transform them also? That's the feeling. The feeling that you get when you look at your collection is what matters the most, and I guarantee you everybody's going to agree with that 100%. But let me know what you think in the comments below, like, and subscribe to Dear Hanger Out.
One shall stand, one shall fall. Why throw away your life so recklessly?